Boss fights have always been a core part of the Zelda experience. They're a test of courage at the end of an arduous dungeon, and often serve as one of the most cathartic releases in video games. Breath of the Wild was highly criticised for its lack of exciting boss fights, with the aspects of Ganondorf being labelled as poor boss fights with a boring visual design. While I agree with the latter half, no one can convince me that Thunderblight Ganon isn't one of the best Zelda bosses in history, and you especially can't convince me that Breath of the Wild doesn't have dungeons to begin with. But I think that both Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom have some of the best boss fights in open world history, not because of the bosses found at the end of dungeons, but because of their open world boss battles. What the open world Zeldas did so much better than any other open world game before was simplifying the open world back to, if you see something interesting, you can go there. There weren't any quests or objective markers guiding you towards fascinating areas. You could just see them and go there. They cut out all the guided things open worlds usually do, and just made sure there was something fun to do no matter what direction you went in. And while it was certainly exciting to see the glow of a shrine in the distance, there's nothing cooler than finding a giant monster out roaming the land, because that's just how simple and fun an adventure should be. If you see a strong monster, why wouldn't you want to fight it? While there's certainly a lot of value in building up to a massive boss fight after a tricky dungeon, that feeling of just stumbling across one with no ceremony and being launched into an epic struggle is a feeling unlike any other. Many people consider one of the highlights of Skyrim to be its dragon battles. There's never any warning or build up to the fight, it just randomly swoops out of the air, and you're in for an epic battle for your life, with Viking chanting going on in the background, and it's glorious. However, Zelda's open world bosses are much more varied and, dare I say, cinematic than Skyrim's dragons, with some of them being better than entire boss lineups in previous Zelda games. Hinoxes are probably the least interesting of the lineup, with their slow attacks and spammable method of arrows to the eye, but it's incredibly tense to dodge past its slam attacks, as its massive AoE damage is what makes this boss exciting, though its speed does hold it back. But this fight can be a lot more fun if you try to sneak up on a Hinox and steal the weapons on its necklace without incurring a battle, so I consider the Hinox to be better as a stealth battle rather than a boss battle. Taluses also have an easily spammable method to defeat, but they have an advantage with their surprise entrances. One of the moments no Breath of the Wild player will ever forget if they encountered it was finding the stone talus on the Great Plateau, having it rise up from nowhere as the most intimidating foe you've fought up to this point, and then getting destroyed by it. And every time you encounter one out in the open world, it always comes as a shock the first time before you learn to recognize the smooth rocks. While these fights are made super easy with arrows, like the Hinox, you can make them more cinematic by trying to jump on one to get to its weak spot. In Tears of the Kingdom, this is even more fun with the addition of Ascend, taking you through its body straight to the top, and when you come face to face with its elemental variants, you get that same sense of dread you initially felt until you figure out its weakness. Not counting the niche Molduga, that was the extent of the open world bosses in Breath of the Wild. Thankfully, Tears of the Kingdom added some of the best boss fights in this franchise to the overworld, with some of the craziest discovery moments coming from those boss fights. Namely, the Gleeoks. These are the most imposing Zelda bosses I have ever seen. Their intense glow makes them stand out at night, and their attacks are lethal. Fighting Gleeoks is maybe the most intense challenge in Tears of the Kingdom, but it's also by far the most fun. The highlight is obviously ascending through its attacks to try and meet it in the air for the final blow. I love that there's a boss that uses slow motion aiming, and the cinematic climb through the air is one of the most exhilarating boss battle methods ever, to the point that I can't believe these aren't main boss fights. But no Zelda open world boss has ever been more horrifying than Phantom Ganon. They are the only boss that you don't get to challenge directly because they always find you, often without warning. Their terrifying design of shadowy hands always makes your skin crawl, and what's worse is that there's no reliable way to counter them without bomb arrows. The hands themselves could be a boss fight on their own, but when you defeat them, they manifest into a proper boss that's nothing short of amazing. The Phantom Ganon fight is the perfect mix of intimidating design, astonishing attack patterns, and massive rewards, as the bow and sword you get for defeating him are easily the best late game weapons. With the fight being a teaser of the final boss, it's bound to whet your appetite for Ganon, as well as being intense on its own. While many other games have had better boss battles than the last two Zeldas, no other game has incorporated such incredible bosses into its open world as well as the previous two Zeldas. Okay, there's a bit of an author's note here, but it did occur to me that I haven't played Elden Ring, so maybe this video is wrong, but it's already finished. But ignoring that, if you enjoyed this video, here's one about how Tears of the Kingdom's final boss eclipses Breath of the Wild's, and I'll see you in 2 days.